Yeah, so hello BWSI. How was your first day? Good, awesome. It's really good to have you here all today. We are very, very fortunate today to have as our first lunchtime speaker, Dr. Jerry Wohletz. He is the president and CEO of Draper Laboratories here in Cambridge. Draper is one of the most innovative companies in sort of the national security technology space. They grew out of Doc Draper's laboratory, instrumentation laboratory at MIT in the 1930s and 1940s. Developed much of the groundbreaking work in inertial navigation and guidance systems, built the guidance systems for all the Apollo missions as well, and has since just expanded and grown. There are over 2,500 people right now that Jerry oversees and leads across a number of different locations within the US. So we're just really, really fortunate to have Jerry here today. He came to Draper out of executive roles at BAE previously and is an MIT PhD and graduate of the Aero-Astro program here as well. So please welcome Jerry.
All right, thank you, Scott. All right, today I'm going to give a speech that I originally gave to this group for the very, very first time in 2019. So I've been asked to come back and give this repetitively, especially for the last 3 years. So to get the ball rolling, this is going to be some interactive. So we're going to lead off this with the following question. What is the definition of leadership? Yes?
The ability to essentially manage those collaboratively and collaborate with a group in achieving a common goal, usually as their leader, directing, basically being able to break down whatever goal you're trying to achieve into small steps. And dividing the work among your group and essentially leading them to success to that extent, while also working with them, taking their suggestions and essentially working with them while also working as their.
All right, so collaborate, to guide, decompose. Who else? Go in the back.
Being able to take other people's ideas and your own ideas and moving that into one unified shape of progress.
So taking ideas that could be your own or others and forming that into a common destination. Did I get that pretty close? All right, I like that. I'm going to go over here. Anyone over here? Yes.
So the ability to affecting others and making better communication between people.
Making better communication among other people. I'm going to go online. Is there anyone online that would like to offer up here before I go to the top? All right, while we're waiting, we're going to go in the back here. Go ahead.
To serve the community and serve the people that you're leading. Serve people you are leading. I'm going to do one final since you had your hand up.
To be conductors, help others reach their full potential.
I love that part. That is excellent. All right, so I'm going to offer up a definition here for the purpose of this discussion. What you're going to find is there is actually no right or wrong answer for leadership, but we need a definition. So the definition I'm going to use, I borrowed from the Harvard Business Review, the ability to develop a vision, right, and inspire others, right, to achieve great results. Okay, so let's talk about this. Developing a vision is about painting a portrait of a brighter tomorrow and is often what I will call the what. All right? The how to the what is inspiring others to achieve great results that they often don't see that they're even capable of achieving. And it results in a lot of encouragement and support for your team to figure out the how to the what. Now, this combination, vision and inspiration, are necessary conditions to achieve great results. And I would suggest the combination of doing the two are one of the rarest commodities in humanity. Now, I'd like to translate this definition now to you. So let's talk about personal leadership. Personal leadership is the ability to develop a vision and inspire yourself to achieve great results. You see the parallels between the two. All right, so this is where my story begins. So let's just cover a few results to date. Scott mentioned some of them. Here are the different titles that I have held, and it's amazing to say this, in my 34-year career as an engineer. And what you can see here is I've done a bunch of different things. And let's talk about the roles that are underneath those titles. And the roles here really speak to where your focus is. And a few that should jump out to you is thought leader, change agent, strategist, and mentor. Next, I've actually worked at a lot of different places throughout my career. 2 large aerospace and defense companies, 2 startups. I've spent time working for the United States government in national security, and I've spent some time in academia. And today, as Scott said, I'm at a nonprofit as the president and CEO of Draper Laboratories. Finally, here's some of the accolades that I have received throughout my career. So how did I get here to this point today? To answer this question, let me take you back a little over 2 decades ago when my assistant told me, quote, "You are exactly the image of a guy who grew up with a silver spoon in your mouth." That's when I decided that I would start to tell my leadership journey. So to start this conversation, let me take you back, all right? My wife and I were both from Kansas. Today we have 2 daughters, one's 24, one's 21. Have a son who is 17. Just like most families, we have both a cat and a dog. We cannot decide. Unlike the typical images of Kansas, though, we actually grew up in a place called Kansas City, Kansas. As you can imagine, most people that I talk to have no idea the difference between the Midwest, Kansas, or Kansas City, Kansas. It is just simply one of the many states you fly over to go from one coast to the other. Just out of curiosity, show of hands, any Midwesterners here? All right, so the Midwesterners do understand this distinction. And when I try to explain Kansas City, Kansas to the people I live with here, there is no analogy of this environment in New England. It is best described as high-density poverty and all the challenges that brings with lots of drugs and lots of crime. In fact, my neighborhood and my wife's neighborhood has been featured regularly on shows called Cops and Kansas City SWAT. So we got our own dedicated crime show that is real life, unfortunately. In this environment, the common path was to graduate from high school, go to the community college or to a vocation school, and ideally get a job with the city, working for the police department, the fire department, or the public utility department. But there was a problem for me. I was a struggling student and actually had to go to summer school to get from the 3rd grade to the 4th grade. Now, I understand summer school today is a little different. It's a way that you can excel and get ahead in school. But back in the late 70s and early 80s, that was an absolute badge of shame having to walk to school during the summer with a backpack on so that I could get to the next grade. And in fact, you got branded as a stupid kid, and that was something that you just simply couldn't shake. There was also yet another problem. I had a lot of energy, and that energy often led to me getting into a lot of trouble. And as you can imagine, bad student getting in a lot of trouble doesn't end up well. So around 6th grade, can't really explain why in 6th grade, but around 6th grade, I started to extrapolate forward where I was going to end up in life, and it wasn't difficult to find a lot of examples. People who were living in homes that were dilapidated without heat, living on the streets, in jail, or even worse. But I chose at that moment that I actually wanted to not live the destiny that I was expected to be, that I wanted to be a credit to society, not a deficit. So I made a commitment that every single day I was going to better myself. And in the process of doing that, do everything I could to stay out of trouble. But now back to that definition of leadership. So what was I going to become, and how was I going to do it? So to explain this journey, I'm going to share with you 6 principles that I believe wholeheartedly that allow anyone today to replicate my journey. It would not be my journey, rest assured. It would be your own journey. But I am, and you will hear this over and over, I am adamant it is possible to do this today. So let's begin with the what. So in 6th grade, a struggling student that had to go to summer school decided that I was going to be an astronaut. And to be an astronaut, I needed to be a fighter pilot, because that was the vast majority at the time. Astronauts were fighter pilots. And to be a fighter pilot, I needed to go to a service academy or go to a good engineering program and take my aptitude test post my bachelor's degree. So my first leadership recommendation to all of you is dream big, don't play small ball. So every day I took a step forward with that destination, that in order to be an astronaut, a fighter pilot, go to a good school, get an engineering degree, do well on aptitude tests, which meant I had to go to college, which meant that I had to do better, and I can't be in a situation where I have to go to summer school each year. So I started to close the gap, but by the time I graduated from high school, I still wasn't prepared for college. My standardized test, you guys would laugh at the scores I received, even though I took them twice. And I did not, in fact, meet the minimum qualifications to go to college. So, and I wasn't exposed to topics such as calculus or everything that you guys have afforded today. So I am a big believer, big dreams, big steps. Small dreams, small outcomes. Which takes me to my second recommendation. Right, my second recommendation is take the chances when the opportunity presents itself and just recognize the time will suck. The timing's never great. The only reason I was able to go to college, which was the University of Kansas, was that at that time, the Kansas Regency system allowed Kansas residents 1 semester. If you wanted to go to college, you got 1 chance, 1 semester. And so I was accepted for a single semester at the University of Kansas, promptly put on probation, and received all kinds of letters from the university that were along the lines of, don't do something stupid here, don't do something rash, you're just here for 1 semester, have fun. When I attempted to enroll in an aerospace engineering program, I clearly was denied because I was on probationary status and did not meet the minimum requirements, and so I was enrolled in pre-engineering courses with a clear message. They were scheduled at 7 a.m. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Anything less than a C in any one of the weed-out courses, you were expelled from the university because that was the path that people had chosen for me. Recognizing this is my 1 shot, I approached my 1 semester very different from most freshmen. I studied 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. Though I had developed very strong aptitudes that would have served fraternities very well, I chose not to do that. I had done enough of that in high school. I simply put that life away and studied. In fact, I could not properly write entering college. So I grabbed a grammar book and read it cover to cover over and over and over until I mastered it. I still have that grammar book to this day. I'm still not a good writer, though. So at the end of my freshman semester, I met the minimum threshold to stay and got enrolled to the aerospace engineering program, but also something happened. I got straight A's. And so the university, instead of sending me the letters of thank you for your 1 semester, please don't do something rash while you leave, sent me a different letter. And that letter stated, people like you don't get straight A's from where you came from. You continue to get straight A's, we'll cover school. Room and board, everything, which was really good because I had no game plan at that time. So over the next 4.5 years, as it took me 5 years to do a 4-year degree, I got all A's with the exception of 2 B's. I graduated with highest distinction, was the speaker at the engineering graduation ceremony. And then I was approaching graduation. I started to take my fighter aptitude tests for both the Air Force and the Navy, and I did extremely well on those tests. But unfortunately for me, but fortunately for the world, the Berlin Wall had fallen my freshman year in school, and we were in a massive downturn in the industry. And our nation did not need fighter pilots. And in fact, graduates from the service academies did not receive fighter pilot slots. No one did. So how is a student from the University of Kansas going to make it? So I was faced with a difficult choice. Do I stay at the University of Kansas and get a master's where I was established, comfortable, or do I get a job in industry, or do I go to MIT where I was accepted? So I started to reflect back at how hard it was for me to leave Kansas City, Kansas, to go to KU, and the environment for which I knew I would not do well in, but man, was I homesick. Was it really, really hard just to walk away from that? So I started thinking about leaving comfort zones. And I made a decision at that point that I was going to commit to leaving comfort zones, because when I left a comfort zone, I grew as a person. So that began my journey of what I call professional cliff diving, which takes me to my third lesson. Leave comfort zones and go after diverse experiences. So as I mentioned, the economy was really bad when I graduated. In fact, MIT was in chaos at that time, where laboratories would take 40 students a year for graduate school. They were taking 1 or 2. And there just weren't the opportunities. So I was able, after 6 months, so 2 Bs, 3.98 GPA on a 4.0 scale. It took me 6 months to get a job because there were no jobs. And so it took me 6 months, and I landed a job at a company called McDonnell Douglas in St. Louis. I was their first hire in 4.5 years because they had a big program canceled, the A-12. They laid off 8,000 engineers in 2 weeks. I was very fortunate. I came in as an aerodynamicist on the design team for the FAEF Super Hornet. So that's the aircraft, the F-18 Super Hornet in Maverick Top Gun. I was one of many engineers that helped design the wing of the aircraft. I also supported current military ops with the current FA-CD Hornet as well. It was a great job. I got to solve some fantastic problems, but there was a problem. I was 22 years old, the youngest person in a department of 400 engineers. The next closest person to me was 28. 30-year-olds were still doing entry-level work because there were no jobs, no opportunities, and the average age was up in the upper 40s, and everyone was married with kids. And here I am, the only hire. No one followed me. So upon first flight of the Super Hornet, I decided to jump over to the Phantom Works and became a structural dynamicist and flight control engineer and decided to go back to school. At that point, 1 year later, MIT had recovered, and I took a leave of absence and came here to MIT. So at MIT, right, it was like starting all over. I was at the University of Kansas, I was trained as an engineer. I am now competing with the best of the best aspiring scientists. Engineers and scientists are actually different breeds. They are not the same. So I quickly assessed that my credentials were not up to snuff. So yet again, 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, I had to catch up on my own with math and other areas. And in my first semester, I got straight A's again. In the process of doing that, I was able to secure funding, not from McDonnell Douglas, but from NASA and the Air Force. And the catch was that every summer I needed to leave Boston and either go work at Edwards Air Force Base at NASA Armstrong, was called Dryden back then, or the Air Force Research Laboratory in Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, Ohio. In doing so, I got to work on the coolest stuff. I got to do flight tests for X airplanes. It was an absolute blast. Then, as I approached my master's degree on schedule, I decided to take my qualification exam for a PhD program here. I studied for, again, now 2 straight months, 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. There was a 33% failure rate for the limited people that were invited to take this exam. And at that time, and the policy has changed here at MIT, but at that time, you had to believe in reincarnation. Because if you did not pass that test, that was your once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. I received one of the top scores And then at that time, Boeing had purchased McDonnell Douglas, and I was able to extend my leave of absence for 3 years. Fortunately for me, I was able to get my coursework, and I'd say there's a bit of luck, coursework done in 1.5 years. And then my thesis proposal, I was able to theoretically and experimentally prove in 1 year. I graduated with a PhD from MIT in 2.5 years, to the average of 4 to 5 years. So, little fun fact, it's almost comical. 2 degrees from MIT in 4.5 years, 1 degree from KU took me 5 years. I am now in a position where I'm supposed to return back to Boeing St. Louis and work. I am set up with a wonderful job. I'm supposed to go work on the Unmanned Combat Air Vehicle, or the UCAV program. A lot of people don't know about this program. It's in the museum today. But I decided to go professional cliff diving again. So I quit a perfectly good job, moving back to the Midwest, where I was already identified as a future VP, and I joined an MIT startup company called AlphaTech. At AlphaTech, it was pretty straightforward. They hired talented people and said, on a $1 million basis, grow the business 20% per year to keep your job. You do under that, you're fired. You do better than that, you'll be rewarded. The company gave you latitude to do whatever you wanted to explore. So knowing that I was supposed to go work on the UCAV program, I had done reconfigurable flight controls up to that moment, but I saw the future was in autonomy. I started a new field of multi-vehicle mission control for UAVs called autonomy, which happened to be a topic of prior BeaverWorks talks. And in fact, first publication and first award for autonomy in early 2000s. In this job, I had to do everything. I had to build a team, I had to do contracts, I had to do finance, I had to do security, everything. And it was an unbelievable experience going from a large company to somewhere where you had to do everything. But it was also very humbling. In a small company, you make a bad decision as a leader, someone doesn't get paid, which means a family can't pay their mortgage or college tuition bills. And it is a daunting responsibility to think about these people you hired and your obligation not to screw up and ensure that you do not create a life event for them. So at AlphaTech, how'd I do? I did a little better than the 20% per year. I averaged 38%. And more importantly, not a single one of my employees ever had to be let go. The product that was developed is deemed a national asset, has done great things for our nation ever since. As a result, BAE Systems bought this little company in 2004. And here I am back into a large corporation again. So BAE Systems is quite large. I had restrictions. It was in my best interest to maintain employment at BAE for 3 years. Financially, it would have been foolish to leave earlier than that. But I was ready to go professional cliff diving again. So I just didn't sit back and wait for my 3 years to time out. I actually rotated up to the larger part of the company and joined the electronic warfare business. Now, the only problem is I went from a pretty low-level engineer at Boeing, went and did a startup, became an executive at a startup. Startup gets purchased. I'm now going back into a very, very large company as a senior executive, bypassing all those ranks. The implication was I was 20 years younger than my average peer, 20 years younger. The president who pulled me out of AlphaTech to go work in the organization then retired 6 months after my arrival. So what do you think happened? 20 years young, handpicked, ooh, not good. So, and then we had our next downturn. The year is 2008, right? And I think, Pete, you guys certainly know what happened in 2008, quite the downturn. So I ended up in a position where I was resented for my role, and they really didn't want me to be in that organization. So my next recommendation here is jump at the opportunities to take on the tough assignments. I can't tell you that I would do that experience again. I'll be honest with you, it did suck. However, I approached it from a mindset of learning. So initially, there was a lot of mistrust, so they would only put me into a strategy role. And in that strategy role, I took an opportunity to actually go self-teach an MBA in strategy. I had a strategy job, I should know something about strategy. So I took that as an opportunity, and then I applied what I learned to literally redefine the strategy for electronic warfare. I put forward an investment case that promised $3 billion over a decade. It actually delivered $5 billion. And as that investment case took hold, the company started trusting me. So then they put me back into profit loss, because that's what I had at the startup company. And in that process, what ended up happening was, as my initial profit loss, they gave me every program that was losing money. And then they gave me the personnel that they thought were not the top talent. So I have the bleeding programs and, you know, what some would say is not the A team. But what we basically did is we sat down, put a strategy together, basically returned the different programs to profitability and had a blast doing that. And then the company started giving me, hey, okay, maybe he's not so bad. And then the next one, and this is in the upper right, this was a $4 billion pursuit. And the customer told us that we were in 4th place out of 4 competitors and we should just drop out. So the company's like, well, hey, Jerry, how about you go in there and restructure this and win it for us? I'm like, sure, why not? So jump in and we turn it around. Unfortunately, we still lost the competition. But at that point, the acceptance was even higher. So then the next assignment, which is in the lower left, was going to be my cozy coast recovery, right, job after the grueling competition. Well, that program got canceled in the first 2 months of my job. So back into a crisis. And we were able to turn that around, reverse the decision of the cancellation of that weapon system, and there's a brand new system operational for our nation today. And then they asked me, now in the bottom center, to take on the largest product line in all of BA Systems at that time, a product line that was much bigger than most of the VPGMs. And as a lateral movement in all of these, I just took the assignment and exceeded expectations, did this through a strategy with just a solid team. Didn't replace anyone on the leadership team, but it was all about working with that team and having them achieve greater results than what they thought they were possible. Then finally, they said, all right, we'll now promote you to a VP. Now I'm only 12 years younger than my average peer. And as you'll see here, I did several VP assignments. Again, these ended up all being restructuring assignments. So I became the person, when there was a problem, I was the person they parachuted in to go fix it. And I will tell you, probability is more probable than not, but you go into these assignments with, I'm going to learn. And then I departed BA Systems, as Scott said, 6 years ago, and now at Draper. So let me ask the following question, and this is how I'll set up number 5. How many people in the room can juggle? Raise your hand and keep them up. All right? Really? That's it? All right? 3 balls. 4. Keep them up if you can do 4 balls. 5? Okay, I got the, all right. Anyone online with 6 balls?
2 out of 286.
For 6 balls?
1.
1. There is 1 person that can do 6 balls. All right, so that's amazing. All right, now, assuming Wikipedia is correct, which everything on the web's right, correct? 1 in 200,000 people can juggle 6 balls. 1 in 200,000. And by the way, the record is supposedly 9 balls, right? That's the world record. The reason I bring this up is that when you look at these turnaround assignments, and I'm going to now talk to you about what I do, is that as a CEO, and this is a book by McKinsey called CEO Excellence, and I'll be very frank with you. If you are interested in being a leader, I'd read this book right now. Because what I found is they talk about CEOs have to spin these 6 plates, 6 balls juggling. I would suggest for every one of those turnaround assignments I discussed, they prepared me to be a CEO. I had to do all 6 of these things simultaneously. Which takes me to now one of the most critical things in doing this, and this is what we discussed earlier, is that when you take on these hard assignments, here's the reality that you're gonna face. Whether you're young, whether you're different than the normal demographic that's in the group, whether or not you got a degree from a different school than everyone else, whatever the reason is, here's what you're gonna walk into. Basically, the 1/3, the 1/3, the 1/3. You're gonna have immediately about 1/3 of that group that's gonna sit there and say, yes, great leader, I'm behind them. And then you're gonna have 1/3 that sits there and says, what a buffoon. I cannot believe this person was chosen to lead us. This is ridiculous. What I'm gonna suggest here is that your number one focus needs to be on the middle third. Many people make the mistake, and they will just work with the third that likes them, or they're going to try to work to convince the third that doesn't like them that try to change their minds. The reality is you're not gonna change no one's mind in the upper third or the lower third. They're going to be set. However, the middle third is actually confused, and they're looking for a group to join. So if you want to inspire your team to do great results, focus on the middle third. Understand what their dilemma is, understand what their hesitation is, recruit them to join your supporters. And when you do that, you now have critical mass. You got 2/3 of the organization behind you, because you will achieve nothing as an individual. Right? You can go work on a car. You can achieve that as an individual. Leading organizations is all about, again, setting a vision and inspiring others to achieve things that they do not see possible in themselves, which means you need the critical mass behind you. So, this takes me now to my final recommendation. If you go back and look in history at the greatest leaders, you will see that they experience failure early and often. And I mean great leaders, I'm going back in antiquity. Alexander the Great, Caesar, Napoleon, the list goes on and on, Churchill, right? What is considered to be the world's greatest leaders had dramatic setbacks early on in their careers. The phrase that sticks in my head is you win some, you learn from some. Don't underestimate the importance of learning that comes from failure. When you do experience a setback, don't miss the opportunity to learn. Approach it from a perspective of not just bouncing back, but bouncing higher. So let me share 2 stories with you. My first story goes back to my days at MIT. My lab mate, Vlad, I would share his last name, but he's an aerospace executive, does not like me telling the story. But Vlad wanted to learn how to ice skate. Vlad was clearly from Russia. And wanted to learn how to ice skate. So I took him to the ice rink right down the road here, which you guys will be doing your race cars in. And I basically gave him a few lessons, and my departing words to Vlad was, if you're not falling, you're not trying hard enough, you will not learn as quickly. Later that week, Vlad shows up in the lab. He's got a cast on his hand, broke his pinky. I said, what happened, Vlad? He goes, well, I just followed your direction. I fell on the ice and broke my pinky. So a caution, keep in mind. There's a fine line between being bold and being stupid. And the most important thing to remember is that in the moment, you can't determine what side of that line you're on. It's only after time passes do you know. So be humbled. Question constantly, what side of that line are you on? Second, caution. Leadership is not for the faint of heart. You are all here because you got that fire in your belly. There's a lot of work that you have to go to sit in this audience here or be online, right? So you've got that fire in your belly. But recognize that you can get hurt in this sport as well. So now my second example, I'm going to go back to that $4 billion pursuit that I talked about that I lost. It was a turnaround effort. It took us 2.5 years to basically support the proposal. We restructured our team, our offering. In doing so, we spent $100 million of company investment. We built prototypes, and we wrote a 25,000-page proposal, which is ridiculous. As I noted, we didn't win, and generally when you don't win and you have to notify your shareholders that you lost, and it was 1,000 jobs across the nation that were going to be lost. A leader's head must roll. So imagine the surprise when we were notified that we didn't win, when all indications, and was proven after the fact, that we had a superior offering at a lower cost. That was a pretty lonely drive home that night. Fortunately for me, the GAO investigated the ruling and favored, in our sense, that the source selection was flawed. The point of my story, though, is how I conducted myself with that crushing loss and through the protest period where my fate was undetermined. There was no doubt that I made mistakes, and I ensured that everyone knew that I owned them. Though I was the guy who lost the big one, however, I used that experience to bounce higher. So now to that cushy, cozy job, the franchise program, 3 decades of execution. You didn't have to worry about it. You could just show up and sleep, and that program was supposed to go on. It was canceled in 2 months while I was there. So I took the lessons learned from the big loss, applied them to that situation, and then orchestrated the biggest turnaround in BAE's company's history. I don't know if they've got a better one at this point, and authored the EA-37 Bravo Compass Call, which is the new electronic warfare aircraft that is now in operation for our nation today. This one also ended up in a GAO protest. We were on the other side of the ledger, and also had a favorable ruling. So, fail early, fail often. So this takes me back to the beginning of the story. If you want to be a great leader of others, you better learn how to lead yourself first and foremost. I highly recommend that you do the following 6 things during your leadership journey. Dream big, don't play small ball. Take your chances when the opportunity presents itself. Leave comfort zones, go after diverse experiences. Take the tough assignments with the intent to learn. Focus on changing culture, and business results will follow. And then finally, push yourself early to experience failure, learn, and then bounce higher. Clearly along the way, you must get to know yourself, your values, your motives, your communication styles, your dreams. Do not underestimate how hard this is. You would not believe the number of leaders today that have tried to skip this step. The problem is that they are hollow, lack authenticity. Without authentic leadership, the ability to influence others is diminished. Thus, they are leaders by title only. Then they do fall on the big stage, and a lot of people get hurt. Leadership is a contact sport. As shown here, you often have to be that fish out of water to achieve your dreams. Though lonely, fish can only understand water when they are in the air. So if you just stay in the water, you'll never actually understand the water you're in. Let me leave you with one final story. As I was graduating from MIT with a PhD, MIT sends out the notices to the local newspapers. So one day a reporter from the Kansas City, Kansas contacted my parents and said, hey, people from here don't graduate from MIT, let alone get a PhD. We'd love to interview your son. So my parents talked me into it. The reporter goes to my high school, Bishop Ward, and talks to a few of the teachers and asks for their reaction to Jerry graduating from MIT, let alone with a PhD. And one of the reporters said, check your facts. In all accounts, I shouldn't be where I'm at today. One would think the odds are astronomical. In fact, just the other day, someone told me that today in this country, it is impossible to replicate this trajectory that I have achieved. I could not disagree more. And I understand that you are told that the cards are stacked against you. I'm going to suggest do not let people dictate to you what you're capable of doing, and who you are. You own that decision, not someone online. But let me suggest that you have to be a fish out of water to achieve this. You have to believe in yourself. Don't accept what others believe in you. I had to deal with the cards I was dealt. It is what it is. Day by day, I worked to improve myself while constantly avoiding trouble. When I stumbled, I learned versus playing the victim game. I was constantly on the lookout for good luck. I needed it. When luck presented itself, I grabbed it, and I never forgot it was luck. I have told people over and over, my position here, 50% luck, 50% hard work. How much that hard work impacted the probability distribution of that luck, who knows? But there's a lot of luck. And a lot of luck will present itself to you. Grab it and run. Clearly, I'm not a fighter pilot, nor am I an astronaut. But those opportunities were not presented to me, so I pivoted. I went and designed aircraft. I went and authored weapon systems. I work at a company that is critical to today's Artemis mission and the colonization of the moon and ultimately Mars. I just simply moved to the next opportunity that aligned with my dream of making a difference for our nation. Now, if the nation does say that they want me to be an astronaut or a fighter pilot, I've told everyone I'm gone, right? I will fly that plane in a heartbeat. Thank you very much. So this is the part, we'll take questions in a moment. This is the part where you get to pull your camera out. Anyone interested in a job? Okay. So as graduates of the BWSI Summer Institute, we hire the top students as dictated by your instructors. So at graduation, the top student from each of the courses will be offered an internship at Draper next year. We've been doing this for years, and just to give you an idea, this is the group that worked at Draper last summer. We currently have 23 graduates, and 9 of them are returns either the second or third year. So just again, a little about Draper, and just to put this in perspective. So I'm going to go to, yes, still relatively still a very small business, $1 billion, 12 locations across the United States. We have internships that are spread across the United States. But the most important stat here is that we have 267 interns and co-ops at Draper this year. 30,000 applicants. Did you catch that number? And you can do the math. So you're in a very, very unique program. We are very, very interested in the graduates of this program, right? And essentially, we are looking to support you, whether or not you ever work long-term for Draper, right? We wish you would, but we just want you to be a great engineer and scientist for our nation. And so we offer these opportunities. So do very, very well with your instructors and your TAs, because they will be telling us who among you will be getting offers for next year at graduation in August. Just to give you an idea of what we do, so clearly the upper left, that is what we're doing here today. I just told you about our intern co-op program. We have relationships with 20 universities across the United States. We are currently funding of around 150 master's and PhD students on top of graduate programs. We also have our own interim master's-like program because universities aren't necessarily teaching skill sets that allow you to quickly transition immediately into the type of work we have. And then we also are training our next generation leaders. So here's where you want to take a picture, because this has the web portal and this has the timeline of applications. And what you will see here is that it is very, very important for you to hit these timelines. If you are not offered the position at graduation in August, still apply, but you must get your application in early, right? And then please make sure you highlight, right, BWSI Summer Institute on that application and resume. All right, with that, I can take questions. Yes?
So
I guess, if you're facing circumstances in which you have a lot of setbacks, there's often a feeling of, like, I guess, separation between you and your goal, and kind of like a feeling of loss along lines. So I want to ask, like, in your youth, especially when you were getting started in your career, how did you overcome that? What practice did you do?
So how do you overcome the setbacks that you experience? I'm a firm believer in the following, is that you have to believe in yourself internally. It's got to be something inside you. I am not a big fan of seeking validation from others. So here's how the way I approach it. Did I seek to get the best information for the decision? Yes or no? Was I diligent when a decision was required to be made? If you wait too long, you let nature make the decision. If you make a decision too quickly, you denied yourself of better information. If you can answer yes, I did the best job to get the best information, and I made the decision when the decision needed to be made, that's the best I could do. Whether or not the decision ended up being right or wrong, I divorce that. It sucks when they're not the right decision, but I can only hold myself accountable for getting the right data and making the decision at the right time, because everything in this world is a roll of dice. Everything. Is that fair? Yes.
Oh,
Talk about how, like, being a fish out of water can help you, like, improve in any sort of spaces. Like, how pivotal do you think is to experience that, like, out of water experience?
You can't understand the situation you're in until you leave it. So whether it was leaving Kansas City, Kansas, to go to University of Kansas, or as I talk about leaving comfort zones, it's very, very hard for you to understand how to be a better person and a better leader staying in your current situation, because your eyes only go that direction. By leaving that situation, you can then look back and see, how was I performing? And then only then can you actually critique whether or not you could have done it better. Does that make sense? It's
Can we do
imperative.
online next?
Yes.
Abigail, could you unmute yourself and read your question, please?
Yes. Hi. So my question for you is that, so you have led research organizations, startups, and large engineering teams. So across all of those experiences, what leadership quality consistently distinguished the people who eventually became exceptional leaders from those who were simply excellent engineers?
Excellent leaders versus excellent engineers. I was offered mentorship at McDonnell Douglas by my supervisor, and the mentorship was, all engineers do the good jobs well. It's the great engineers that do the bad jobs well. And it is those that sit there and say, yeah, no, this is really ugly, this is messy, it doesn't matter. I have a job to do, I got a mission to do. The ones that are, and for our, again, I have devoted my entire career to national security. What I have seen is that if you are there focused on national security and defending democracy around the globe, you do very well in our profession. If you're there about you may do well at times, but you eventually do not do well.
One more, Francesca.
Hyunmin, could you unmute and ask your question?
Yep, thank you so much. First of all, like, I really appreciate the insight. But like, just going back to what you've mentioned about like how you cannot tell apart between a boldness and bravery, but only they are kind of distinguished in retrospect. I was just looking to see what kind of then like decision-making framework do you use in the present to ensure that you're kind of on track and you're taking calculated risks than like a reckless kind of sacrifice and stuff like that.
Yeah, and I'll go back to my earlier comment, is that as a leader, you have to make decisions with ambiguity every day. And you got to answer two questions every day. Did I do my best to get the best data? Did the decision need to be made now? Could it be made tomorrow without letting nature make it for me? You have to, as a leader, then divorce the outcome from that. So bold versus stupid is going to go down the path here of not the actual outcome itself, but was I brazen to think that I needed to make that decision so quickly? Did I actually not listen to all the voices and all the data that came to me? Did I have a bias that took me one direction or the other? That's the only thing you can do. And I will suggest that if you constantly look at it from that perspective, it will serve you quite well. So let's jump over here somewhere.
For in-person, just a reminder, can you guys wait till we hand you the microphone so virtual can hear you? I'm going to pass it off to someone over here.
As you progressed in your career and you moved into more of a leadership role at different companies, how did you leverage your experience as both an engineer and a scientist into making yourself a better leader, whether it was at a small company like AlphaTech or some of the bigger companies you were a leader at?
Yeah, great question. Well, believe it or not, I've actually approached my leadership in a very consistent manner the way I was trained as a flight control engineer. And so I actually approach my assignments as experiments that I'm going to close a feedback loop on. And a recognition that when I close that feedback loop, it's going to be imperfect, but I'm going to learn and improve from that. I have done that from the get-go. Now, I will also tell you something that is very difficult for engineers to hear. I stopped being an engineer a long time ago. I'm actually now an HR person that does occasional finances. So to lead engineers and scientists, right, clearly I've got credentials. I can ask very good questions. The moment that I step into the role and try to start solving their problem, right, I've made a huge mistake. I've taken ownership away. Right? It's their job, not my job. I'm most likely going to be wrong. I'll be honest about it, right? You think you're right, you're not, right? You just shut down innovation in your group. So for engineers to make this transition, to go from being an engineer to a supervisor, to let alone an executive, is actually an extremely hard transition, especially if you're an extrovert. Because you want to tell everyone how to solve the problem. And it's the absolute worst thing you could possibly do to your team. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Right?
I'll get one from over here.
Yep.
How did you find the motivation in your college days to work so hard, so consistently for so long?
All I had to do was go back home. Very honest. Right? And look at the environment that I was supposed to be in. And look at people I went to school with and where they were. So, and rest assured, I love Kansas City. I love where I grew up. Cherish those memories forever. But, it's an environment that, destroys people.
We'll do 2 from online, and then we might have to call it done. We're over time.
Okay, Shania, can you unmute and ask your question?
Yes, so I know that you mentioned you don't seek validation from others, and you kind of just touched on the motivation thing, but I was wondering, would you say there's any specific people that motivated you to get through all of these hard times? Because you mentioned your hometown, seeing the people that you went to school with, but did anybody explicitly have to push?
Yeah, I mean, so third generation, German American, immigrated, very blue collar family. So you've got plenty of examples in your family, to include my father and my mother, that, bettered themselves and made the family, the American dream for them, and then created an environment. So rest assured, there are always examples out there to motivate you. There are always examples out there to coach you. You actually have to, though, seek it out, right? And so I want to make sure you guys all walk away here with, right, there is tremendous opportunity for all of you, right? What you just heard is, and it was just reinforced, I do not validate what people say about me on social media. I really don't care. And I know that that bothers some people. But it's true, I just don't care. All I'm trying to do is a good job every single day. And I gotta answer that self to myself every single night. And I do not bat 1,000 at all. So I'm gonna make mistakes, but I'm committed that I will learn from the mistakes and bounce higher. Final question.
Anna Luz, could you unmute and ask your question?
Hello.
Hello?
Earlier on in your presentation, you mentioned that as a leader in an organization, there are groups who do not support you, are undecided, and support you. How do you go about persuading that undecided group of your leadership skills?
How do you get the middle group? To me, you have to understand, so I'm a firm believer that if people in your organization are not getting, right, the result that you desire, start from a position that they're good people, they're smart people, they want to do the right thing. There is a dilemma that is holding them back. There is some barrier that is real for them that you don't see. Go seek to understand that dilemma and remove it for them. Because, especially at my role now, President and CEO, there's very little things of dilemmas for my workforce that I can't remove. It's whether or not I can go figure it out and remove it. And I'll be very honest about it. It's about not just me as an individual, it's about every single one of my leaders in my organization having that mindset that that's their job, is to remove barriers for their employees to get the job done. When you start to do that, that's how you win over the middle third. Excellent question.
All right, thank you so much. We have a couple words from our race car students.
Hi, my name is Faiza Yagli. I'm in the race car course, and I would like to thank you for taking some time out of your day to come speak with us today, and especially sharing your journey from being kind of underestimated as when you were younger. And I think a lot of us in the audience can also relate to that as well. And I hope that we can take your 6-step framework and use that to build our own journey. And I would even go as to say that we have already sort of taken the first few steps. We've dreamed big, we took a chance, we applied to BWSI, and we're here today. And I hope that everybody here, including myself, can continue to take on your words of inspiration and make something bigger with that, change the world, and then also share our story just as you are today with us.
Great, thank you. We're gonna take a picture.
My name's Abner. I'm also from Race Car. And I just want to thank you so much again for coming here. Something I really took away was, you did something people thought was impossible. You went big, and then you kept on going bigger. You used this term of going cliff diving. You kept on going bigger. So you're a huge inspiration to us all. Thank you very much. And you proved to us that our dreams aren't impossible. So thank you.
Thank you. Where are we looking? Oh, here. Oh, thank you. Are you guys going to win?
Yes, of course.
Okay. All right, thank you.
So as you can tell, Jerry is a big supporter of BWSI and has been for a long time. And how excited are we that he has all these opportunities for you after BWSI? So let's give Jerry one more big round of applause. Yep. So we're going to do one picture. So can all of you stand up and try to squish in the middle? It's going to be hard, but we're going to try it. Squish really close. Stand in the stairs. Some of us may be cut off. That means you can't get everybody that's all right. Do the best you can.
Everyone, same smile.